anything goes wrong, you like fall on your ass, you may just die here. Nice bed. It was cold.
Yeah.
Yeah, 15 below is certainly on the way.
Yeah, the worst ever was once I got a flat tire when it was 30 below, and like the lugs were frozen on there, and I was wearing heavy gloves, and I like the lug wrench was uncomfortable to hold because it was so cold, even though I was wearing gloves. So I like gave it a good effort to change the tire for about 15 seconds. Then I just like, you know what? Fuck this. I,
Yeah,
I just,
that's like seriously dangerous. Like you have to get somebody to pick you up, or well, at least you can the car's still running, so you can sit in the car with the heater running.
yeah, I just called somebody. I'm like, yeah, I'm not going to do this. I just called a truck or whatever to like, just take my truck, put a new tire on it because this one appears fucked and like, whatever. I don't really care what you charge me. Well, all right. Welcome to the Practical Pistol Show, people. My name is Ben, here to answer your shooting questions. We have Mr. Nick on today. Say hello, Mr. Nick.
Hello, Internet.
Hello, Internet. Yay. And the coolest dude in practical shooting, Matt Hopkins. Is that true?
Hi.
Who is the coolest dude in
No.
practical shooting, Matt?
Define cool.
You define cool. Just respond intuitively. Don't think about it too hard.
See, I don't know. It's such a hard question because I think that like it's easy to say the like most respected person in shooting.
Yeah, who cares about that, though?
Well, yeah. Like I don't think if somebody is cool or not. So
I pretty
just
much
bait
think
me to
about
try to-
like who's cool. That's all I think
Do
about.
you?
Yeah, like who would I want to hang out with?
That's different though.
I hang out with cool people. I don't hang out with idiots.
Well, but are they cool in just like general life, or are they cool because they're shooters?
I don't know anybody who's cool because they're a shooter.
Fair enough.
Yeah, the cool people I know who are like the ideal level for shooters is like M or like a low level GM. Like those people are cool. They're fun. You know, they're competent at shooting, but it's not like they haven't taken it to this like all consuming, completely ruined my life for the sport level that we have.
That's where I'm at.
No, that's where I am too. Like 110%.
Yeah, right.
What?
You don't let it consume your whole life?
No, I'm at that level where it's completely fucked.
Oh, yeah. Okay. I thought you were saying you were the level below that.
Absolutely not. No, like I'm completely fucked all the time. Where it's like, I got to go to this place to do this thing for shooting. And it's like, oh, okay. And then if I'm at home and I have nothing to do, it doesn't matter because it's like, you're going to get up, you're going to dry fire, you're going to go to the range, you're going to shoot, you're going to load ammo, you're going to clean the brass, you're going to do all this shit. Why? Because shooting. Because, you know, because that's what you're into. Anyways, Ben, I shoot a Shadow 2 in IPSC production. So when I dry fire, I will do 2 double action pulls on paper and 1 double action pull on steel. Not what you teach. He's correct. That is not what I teach. Doing the short stroke so I don't reset the trigger as my single action pull just doesn't seem or feel natural to me. So just to clarify what this guy's talking about here, what I tell people to do is for if they're drawing their double action pistol out of the holster, they're going to do some dry fire with it. First shot, pull it all the way through on double action, the hammer falls. And then if you're going to simulate single action presses, you let the trigger come out a little bit, so if it was in single action mode, it would reset, and then press in again hard, so that if it was a live gun in single action mode, it would fire the next shot. So really, the hammer only falls on the first shot, and then for subsequent shots, you're working the trigger a little bit, but the hammer's not really moving. Nick and Matt, I think you guys follow that, right?
Mm-hmm.
That is exactly how I dry fire when I dry fire.
Okay, so this guy says, do you see this as being detrimental in any way, and if so, how? Do you recommend I just stop my way of dry fire and try to become comfortable with your way, or a combination of both? I think it is, generally speaking, detrimental. There are some guys who are very good shooters do this, and it doesn't cause any problems. But what I'll tell you is this. It is frequently the case that I will see a good shooter that I look at the guy, and you guys probably know what I'm talking about. You watching a guy shoot, and just from the way he moves, the way he draws the gun, loads it up when you tell him to load his gun, the way he holsters his gun, the way he draws at speed, the way he shoots. You look at that dude and you're like, that guy practices a lot. You know what I'm talking about? You see somebody and they have a high level of familiarity with their gun. Nick, you with me on this?
Mm-hmm.
You can just tell. You look at a guy, you're like, high level of familiarity. So it is frequently the case that I will see somebody like that. I can tell they practice a lot, high level of familiarity with their gun. They look very comfortable with it. They'll be good to go, slow fire. They can hit everything in the center. But when I see them start shooting at speed, it is frequently the case that they'll fire their first shot and it'll go straight, and then their second shot's going to go low left. And they're shooting a double action gun. Okay, so they shoot good slow, high level of familiarity with the gun, but when it's like, hey, go fast, like go match speed and shoot straight, they often send that second shot low and left. And then after that, the shots kind of center up. And then I tell you, like, this happens maybe if I'm working hard, doing a lot of classes, I'll get maybe 5 or 6 guys in a month that I see like this. So it's something that I see frequently where it's like, I'll pull out my gun and I'll demonstrate dry firing it, pulling the hammer or pulling the trigger back for every shot, having the hammer fall for every shot. And I'll be like, hey, is this how you dry fire? And they'll say yes. And I'll like instruct them on the way I would tell you how to dry fire, where you like are simulating single action. And they're like, oh, okay. And they try that and I explain the problem and they immediately start shooting straight. So what the problem is, they're expecting a lot of resistance for that second, third, fourth, fifth shot, because that's the way they train dry. And they pull the trigger back in a way they're expecting there to be 7-8 pounds of resistance in a long throw, and they end up putting a lot of pressure into the gun and sending the shot down low and left. It's super common. So it's a common enough problem that I see it all the time, and I can identify it just by watching a guy shoot. So yeah, it can cause problems. So I don't recommend it for that reason. Is that clear enough explanation, guys?
Mm-hmm.
Very clear.
Okay.
Makes total sense how you explained it to me.
Yeah, no, I mean, and I honest to God, there's a few problems like that where I see it and I identify it like immediately. Like I know what's going on there without even like, the only reason I'm having a conversation with the person is to confirm what I already know instead of like just telling them what to do. You know what I mean? Because telling them what to do is one thing, but making it clear that I know what's going on, then they're like, oh, okay, I get it now. Right, so that's why I had to change it. Okay, let's go to the next question, because unless you guys have something to add to that.
Yeah, there's just one thing in general that I don't like about it is that you're doing a reset motion every time that is so much more than you're gonna have to do every time when you're actually shooting. One thing that bothers me, and some good shooters.
Wait, so you're saying you don't like double action for every shot?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I'm just saying, to me, I don't like double action for every shot, but the issue for me, really, the reasons I don't like it, in addition to what you said, is that you're doing such a much greater reset. You're training yourself to do a much greater reset. So I think you're going to have potentially, see some people that, have their finger completely come off the trigger between every single action shot. I don't personally like that. I know some people that do it fine, but to me, you're wasting motion. Then you're doing more of a reset, spending more time than you have to doing that. And then, so also then your dry fire timing is going to be a little bit off versus what it could be when you're live firing as well. So even if you're not really doing, the single action reset is not, it doesn't feel exactly the same either. But to me, it's a question of do you want to be way off with this big excessive reset, or do you just want it to be off a little bit versus, just moving your finger back and forth a little bit without resetting it. I also prefer the second option just because I think it's closer to the sensation you get actually shooting.
Well, one way to explain this to people, or one way that you can have a conversation about this, is like, hey, working your trigger the way I'm telling you to, it's double action for the first shot, and then you don't let it reset all the way for the second, third, and fourth shots. One way to think about that is how you learn your trigger, right? Kind of you learn sort of how much force it takes for double, and then like how much you have to reset it for single. You know what I mean? Like you're learning the trigger by dry firing it that way. As opposed to if you're dry firing in double action all the time, you know that that's not how your trigger is going to behave when you're shooting live ammunition. That's like the one thing you know for sure, is that it won't work that way.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? I think so.
Yeah. I like to get as close to live fire feel at every metric of dry fire as possible. And to me, the not resetting the trigger is closer to that.
Fantastic. Okay. Let's go to the next question. This is going to be a lot of fun. Is using an old gun for dry fire that is a slightly different platform to your match gun not the best idea? I've got a stock 3 now, and I'm buying a Shadow 2 for my new match gun. Should I be looking to buy a second Shadow 2 as well if I want to be serious? Well, let's ask the guy who sells the Shadow 2s. Matt, what do you think about that?
Honestly, I think he'd be okay for a little while. But if like he's going to be shooting major matches and stuff, he probably should get a second gun.
But not just for the dry fire reason, right?
No, that's crazy.
Crazy?
Like, I don't think you're going to, like, really, I don't think you'll wear a gun out enough in dry fire to break it where it wouldn't be able to be used in a match. Do you?
You need a lot of dry fire before that.
Yeah.
I
mean,
mean,
you can take steps where you put like a rubber O-ring or something, even a
Yeah.
snap cap, you probably would never wear it out.
really what wears out on the guns in dry fire is like if you do a trigger, like a really aggressive trigger job on the thing, you know? And it's, you know, a trigger job that you just know when you get it, like this is not going to last forever. And then you start putting wear on it in dry fire, like that could be a problem. But I mean, I think it's totally fine. Dry fire the stock 3, shoot the Shadow 2. That's fine. If you decide you're going to be serious, you're going to need a second Shadow 2 anyway. You know, or at least you'd want to have one just to go to matches, so you like have a backup gun for if you fuck up your main gun or whatever. You know, so you're not having to switch to a Tanfolio or, you know, as a backup gun if something happens to your main gun. So it's like I've only ever switched guns in a match once in my life, but it was really nice having a gun that was the same gun to switch to. You know, that's a nice thing. Nick, got anything to add to that? Got any thoughts?
I wouldn't dry fire with a different gun than I'm going to be shooting in a match. In terms of, well, I wouldn't dry fire a different platform, and I've held both. A Shadow 2, and obviously I know what a stock 3 feels like, and I would not change them between dry fire and shooting, personally, at all. So I would immediately get a second gun, and if I couldn't do that, I would just dry fire and shoot with the same gun until I could get a second gun.
Yeah, that's probably the right way to do it. You know, he could sell his stock 3 and buy a Shadow 2.
Yeah,
That's an
probably
idea.
could. Yeah.
You could sell stock 3 and buy like half a Shadow 2. Like,
He could buy half a Shadow, because Shadow 2s are
Yeah.
overpriced. And it's because of the greedy people that work at CZ USA is really what it is, right, Matt?
Duh.
Yeah, they're buying you Surface tablets with badass cameras on them.
Yeah.
Gotta afford
Jesus.
those badass cameras somehow.
Okay, let's go to the next question because it's going to be fun. Actually, this guy wrote a lot of extraneous information that I don't feel like reading. Okay. So it's a guy shooting AccuShadow. I'm not sure how that's relevant, but I'm going to get to his actual question. Right now in dry fire, I'm trying to focus on quickly coming out of the holster with a solid, strong hand grip and getting my weak hand on the gun sooner and then clamping down before the gun's extended. Concentrating on this seems to cause the gun to settle much sooner. Also, I'm messing around with squeezing halfway through the trigger on the way out and then finishing the pull when the sights are on target. This seems like a good way to get DQ'd. On close, open targets, I'm learning to trust my target focus. It seems to be paying off. I think that trying to learn to consistently time the DA pull to break as the gun settles perfectly on a partial target may not be realistic. There's not a lot of discussion about this on the internet, so I'd really like to hear you talk about it on the show. Okay. So just so we're clear on this, all of us shoot double action guns in competition. What he's talking about is starting to prep the trigger or rolling the trigger back in double action as you're drawing. Well, I shouldn't say as you're drawing. So the gun's out of the holster, you pretty much have two hands on it, and he starts rolling back on the trigger before he really gets the sights on target. Everybody agrees that's what we think he's talking about here, right?
I agree with that. Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay. So I think all of us have probably tried this at some point in practice or maybe in matches. I don't know. Yes? Have all of us tried this? All right. Nick,
So
you
prep it that
tried
early?
this. What do you think about this technique?
So at risk of really pissing off the some folks out there,
Nobody listens to this show anyway. You just go ahead and say what you're going to say.
I think that I think to get the maximum draw speed, especially on close targets, I think you have to do that, or at least I have to do it to get that. If I want to get a draw into the 70s or low 80s or whatever, I cannot wait till the sights are on the target before I start pressing the trigger. So if I'm really going for a maximum draw speed on a close target, I'm forming about the same time my weekend grip is starting to form. So the gun's maybe pointed at kind of a roughly 45-degree angle down in front of me. I'm starting to get my finger on the trigger and starting to press through the double action right then. To maximize draw speed on a close target, I think you have to do that. I'm probably more likely to do it on a close target. In the event that I would pull through it too early or whatever, the gun's already out in a safe direction. So if you AD out or whatever, you're just going to maybe shoot the round a little low, but it's not really a safety issue. I definitely would not try to get my finger on the trigger, before the gun is out, really, out of the holster or, not pointing at your feet anymore. So, like I said, about the time I start to form that weak-hand grip is about the time I start to press the double action if I'm really going for a high-speed draw.
What do you think, Mr. Matt?
I don't think it's a problem with it. I don't even think ROs would be able to see you doing it.
No. All right.
And honestly, I don't think it's breaking any rules either.
Well, let me tell you where I'm at with this and see what you guys think. If I see a guy doing this in a class, which is to say he's drawing on a medium or hard target, usually when you'll notice this is on harder shots. So think like 20-yard piece of steel, 15-yard partial target. I'll see the guy draw, the hammer comes halfway back, he kind of fucks around with the sight picture a little bit, and then he fires a shot.
I don't think that's exactly what he was saying, though, was it?
What's that?
On a hard... Oh, that's the only time you would notice it?
That's when you notice it. So if I see a guy doing that, I'd be like, don't do that. And the reason is it's complicated, right? It's way too much work when you draw the gun and then you're fucking around trying to pull the trigger halfway back and then the sights are on target. It's a lot of stuff to think about. And what ends up from a training perspective, the easiest way to do it is just say sights, then trigger, sights, then trigger. And as you start to round off the edges and get better and get faster, usually what you notice if you're drawing on really tough targets, you're sorting out your grip, cleaning up the sight picture, and you start to roll the double action trigger back for the first shot at the same time. That's usually what people end up doing. Okay? As the targets move closer and they're easier, then you don't spend as much time cleaning up the sight picture and you roll the trigger back more aggressively. And you don't need to train yourself to do this. Just kind of think, hey, sights, then trigger, sights, then trigger. And then you just kind of play around with how aggressively you're running back the trigger. You can take more time with it on the longer shots. Maybe start a little bit. You're going to start a little bit sooner than you might otherwise think. You're still cleaning up the sight picture. And you start rolling it back. And what you want is you roll it back in one motion. You don't want to stop it halfway through because that makes it hard to start it again smoothly. And then on the closer targets, then what you guys are talking about usually happens on its own. There's a close target, it's 3 yards away. I have a desire to shoot it really quickly. So the gun's coming out of my holster. I've got two hands on it. It's angled up more or less towards the target. Then it's okay, your finger's going to go in there and you start, running the trigger back really early. It feels really early. And if you watch guys high-speed footage of guys, usually what's happening is they have the gun more or less pointed at the target before they start pulling the trigger. It's just the gun's not quite at their eye line, so they can't really confirm that it's there yet. Okay, so if you train that way, it's going to get you to the place that you guys are talking about, but it's way less complicated than what this guy's talking about. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah? I hope I explained that right. So, like, what this guy's talking about, this fucking shit is crazy. It's really complicated. Nick and Matt got to the same place on the close targets where you're going to shoot them really early, but didn't have to work that hard at it. It's just like as you train and get faster, you will sort of round off the edges on your own. And it's like, you might want to occasionally check yourself to make sure you're being safe. You know? You know what I mean? I've seen, there's been a couple very high level pro shooters over the years that you've seen them on front sight covers and their fingers in the trigger guard really early. And you're like, yeah, there's bad optics on that. So we don't want that to happen. It doesn't look good. But as long as the gun's like more or less pointed at the target, it should be fine to put your finger in the trigger guard. Does that make sense? I think, maybe. That's my take on it. So I think we all agree on this, yeah?
Yeah.
More or less, yeah. I mean, you're going to end up in the same place. All right, well, guys, we did it. That's all we got for the questions. What do you think?
I think that one good.
It went so good. Well,
Perfection.
listeners, if you have a shooting question you'd like the answer to, go to benstigger.com, send me your question, and Nick will answer it at the risk of pissing you off. Yeah? Or maybe Hopkins will. I don't know.